In this presentation, you will learn about identity politics. Indigenous and tribal peoples are often known by national terms such as Native peoples, Aboriginal peoples, First Nations, Adivasi, Janajati, hunter-gatherers, or hill tribes. Given the diversity of people it aims at protecting, the convention uses the inclusive terminology of indigenous and tribal people and ascribes the same set of rights to both groups. In Latin America, for example, the term tribal has been applied to certain Afro-descendant communities. Indigenous and tribal people are a common denominator for more than 370 million people found in more than 70 countries worldwide. Indigenous and tribal peoples have their own cultures, languages, customs, and institutions which distinguish them from other parts of the societies in which they find themselves. Caste refers to the ascribed status of a person, rigid social groups characterized by a transmission of lifestyle, occupation, and social status from one generation to another. Caste plays a major role in the social standing of a person and helps him to achieve or may even lose the opportunities. Today, even in modern society, the hold of caste has weakened, but it has not disappeared completely. Caste continues to play an important role in society and the social standing of an individual. Identity politics has become an important topic in Indian politics in recent years. The rise of lower classes, religious identities, language groups, and ethnic conflicts have all contributed to the importance of identity politics in India. Identity discourse is, in the opinion of many scholars, clearly a modern phenomenon. Craig Calhoun aptly describes the situation as he argues that it is in modern times that we encounter increased efforts to strengthen individual and category identities and strengthen self-identity. This is primarily a modern phenomenon because some researchers believe that the emphasis on identity is based on the central organizing principle of ethnicity, religion, language, gender, sexual preference, or classy position, etc., in the otherwise modern, tasteless world. It is thus said to be a pattern of belonging, a search for comfort, an approach to community. However, the complex social changes and the implications of various forces, factors, and events in this modern world have rendered such production and recognition of identities problematic. This is to say that in any search for an authentic self or identity, is not an innocent possibility. It involves negotiating other, often overlapping and contested, heterodox or multiple selves. Cascadi succinctly elucidates this by observing, the modern subject is defined by its insertion into a series of separate value spheres, each one of which tends to exclude or attempts to assert its priority over the rest, thereby rendering identity schemes problematic. Nonetheless, the concerns with individual and collective identity that simultaneously seeks to emphasize differences and attempt to establish commonality with others similarly distinguished have become a universal venture. What is identity politics? Identity politics is said to signify a wide range of political activity and theorizing founded in the shared experiences of injustice of members of certain social groups. As a political activity, it is thus considered to signify a body of political projects that attempts a recovery from exclusion and denigration of groups hitherto marginalized on the basis of differences based on their selfhood, determining characteristics like ethnicity, gender, sexual preferences, caste positions, etc. Identity politics thus attempts to attain empowerment, representation, and recognition of social groups by asserting the very same markers that distinguished and differentiated them from the others, and utilize those markers as an assertion of selfhood and identity based on difference rather than equality. Contrastingly placed, it is to imply that adherents of identity politics essentialize certain markers that fix the identities of social groups around an ensemble of definitional absolutes. These markers may be those of language, culture, ethnicity, gender, sexual preference, caste position, religion, tribe, race, etc., institutionalized in jargons, metaphors, stereotypes, and academic literature, and reinforced through practices of positive discrimination or affirmative action. The proponents of identity politics thus assign the primacy of some essence or a set of core features shared only by members of the collectivity and no others, and accept individual persons as singular, integral, altogether harmonious, and unproblematic identities. These co-markers are different from associational markers like those of the workers, who are defined more by their common interests rather than by certain core essential naturally given identity attributes of the groups engaged in identity politics. Though many would argue that worker was an identity deserving legitimacy, and as a group, its movements can be referred to as identity politics, but probably the term identity politics as a body of political projects implied too in contemporary discourses refers to certain essential local and particular categorical identities rather than any universalizing ideals or agenda. The adherents of identity politics utilize the power of myths, cultural symbols, and kinship relations to mold the feeling of shared community and subsequently politicize these aspects to claim recognition of their particular identities. The strongest criticism against identity politics is that it is often challenged by the very same markers upon which the sense of self or community is sought to be built. It is despite the fact that identity politics is engaged in numerous aspects of oppression and powerlessness, reclaiming and transforming negative scripts used by dominant group into powerful instruments for building positive images of self and community. In other words, the markers that supposedly defines the community are fixed to the extent that they harden and release a process of in-group essentialism that often denies internal dialogicality within and without the group, and itself becomes a new form of closure and oppression. Identity politics as a field of study can be said to have gained intellectual legitimacy since the second half of the 20th century, between 1950s and 60s in the United States, when large-scale political movements of the second wave, feminists, Black civil rights movement, gay and lesbian liberation movements, and movements of various indigenous groups in the US and other parts of the world were being justified and legitimated on the basis of claims about injustices done to their respective social groups. However, as scholars like Hayes point out, that although identity politics can draw on intellectual precursors from Mary Wollstonecraft and Frantz Fanon, writing that actually uses this specific phrase, identity politics, is limited almost exclusively to the last 15 years. Identity politics in India. In India, we find that despite adoption of a liberal democratic polity after independence, communities and collective identities have remained powerful and continue to claim recognition. In fact, Betil has shown that Indian polity has consistently tried to negotiate the allegiance to a liberal individual spirit and the concerns and consciousness of community. According to Bikhu Parekh, this process has recognized a wide array of autonomous and largely self-governing communities. It was sought to reconcile itself as an association of individuals and a community of communities, recognizing both individuals and communities and giving them fair and equal treatment. It was probably this claim for and granting of recognition of particular identities by the post-independent state of India that led many scholars to believe that a material basis for the enunciation of identity claims has been provided by the post-independent state and its structures and institutions. In other words, the state is seen as an active contributor to identity politics through the creation and maintenance of state structures which define and then recognize people in terms of certain identities. Thus, we find identity politics of various hues abound in India. The most spectacular, however, are those based on language, religion, caste, ethnicity, or tribal identity. Having said this, it would be wrong on our part to assume that each of these identity markers operate autonomously, independent of the overlapping influence of the other markers. A homogeneous linguistic group may be divided by caste affiliations that may be subdivided by religious orientation, or all may be subsumed under a broader ethnic claim. Caste. Caste-based discrimination and oppression have been a constant feature of Indian society, and in post-independence period, its implications with politics have not only made it possible for the oppressed caste groups to be accorded political freedom and recognition, but has raised consciousness about its potential as political capital. Dipankar Gupta has exposed this contradiction when he elaborates the differences between Dr. Ambedkar and Mandal Commission's view of caste. While the former designed the policy of reservation or protective discrimination to remove untouchability from India, the latter considered caste as an important political resource. The Mandal Commission can be considered the intellectual inspiration in transforming caste-based identity to an asset. Though it can also be said that the upper castes, by virtue of their predominant position, were already occupying positions of strength in political and economic system, when the Mandal highlighted the consciousness of the Dalits by recognizing their disadvantage of caste identity, it caused confrontation issues. The caste system, which is based on the notions of purity and pollution, hierarchy and difference, has, despite social mobility, been oppressive towards the Shudras and outcasts who suffered the stigma of ritual impurity and lived in abject poverty, illiteracy, and denial of political power. The origin of confrontational identity politics based on caste may be said to have its origin on the issue of providing the oppressed caste groups with state support in the form of protective discrimination. Group identity based on caste has been reinforced by the emergence of political consciousness around caste identities. Caste has become an important determinant in Indian society and politics. The mobilization along class identities have resulted not only in empowerment of the newly emerging groups, but has increased the intensity of confrontational politics and thus leads to growing crisis of governability. Religion. Another form of identity politics is religion. Hinduism, Islam, Sikhism, Christianity, and Zoroastrianism are some of the major religions practiced in India. Numerically, Hindus are considered to be the majority, which inspires many Hindu loyalist groups like the RSS or the Shiv Sena and political parties like the BJP or the Hindu Mahasabha to claim that India is a Hindu state. These claims generate homogenizing myths about India and its history. The claims are countered by other religious groups who foresee losing autonomy of practice of their religious and cultural life. It initiates contests that result in communal riots. Thus, appeasement theory, forcible religious conversions, anti-Hindu and anti-India attitude of the minority groups, hegemonic aspirations of majority groups, and denial of a social-cultural space to minority groups. Historically, the Hindu revivalist movement of the 19th century is considered the period that saw the demarcation of two separate cultures on the basis of religion, Hindus and Muslims, which was further deepened because of the partition. This division has become institutionalized in the form of communal ideology and a major part of the Hindu-Muslim conflict. The rise of Hindu national assertiveness, politics of representational government, persistence of communal perceptions, and competition for socio-economic resources are considered some of the reasons for the generation of communal ideologies and their transformation into major riots. Identity schemes based on religion have become a major source of conflict, not only in the international context, but since the early 1990s, it has also become a challenge for Indian democracy and secularism. In independent India, the majoritarian assertion has generated its own antithesis in the form of minority religions assertiveness, resulting in confrontational politics. The process through which this religious assertiveness is being increasingly institutionalized by a methodical rewriting of history as the potential to reformulate India's national identity among communal trajectories. Language. Identity claims based on the perception of a collectively bound together by language can be said to have its origin in pre-independence politics of the Congress that had promised reorganization of states on linguistic basis. It was Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, and Pathabhi Sitaramaya committee's concession that if public sentiment was insistent and overwhelming, the formation of Andhra from the Telugu-speaking region of the then Madras could be conceded, which, as Michael Breacher mentions, was the opening wedge for the bitter struggle over states reorganization, which was to dominate Indian politics from 1953 to 1956. Ironically, the claim of separate states for linguistic collectivities did not end in 1956 and even today continues to confront the concerns of Indian leadership. The problem has been that none of the created or claimed states are mono-ethnic in composition, and some even have numerically and politically powerful minorities. This has resulted in a cascading set of claims that continue to threaten the territorial limits of existing states and disputes over boundaries between linguistic states. For example, Maharashtra and Karnataka over the district of Belgaum. Linguistic divisions have been complicated by the lack of a uniform language policy for the entire country. In each state, the dominant regional language is often used as a medium of instruction and social communication. Thus, language becomes an important premises on which group identities are organized. Though it is generally felt that linguistic states provide freedom autonomy for collectivities within a heterogeneous society, critics argue that linguistic states have reinforced regionalism and provided a platform for articulation of identity claims in a country that has 1,652 mother tongues and only 14 recognized languages around which the states have been reorganized. They argue that the effective result of a recognition of linguistic groups has disembodied the feelings of national unity and national spirit in a climate where Maharashtra for Marathis, Gujarat for Gujaratis, etc. has reinforced linguistic mistrust and defined the economic and political goods in linguistic terms. Ethnicity. There are two ways in which the concept of ethnic identity is used. One, ensures the formation of identity on the basis of a single attribute, which is language, religion, caste, region, etc. And secondly, it considers the formation of identity on the basis of multiple attributes cumulatively. However, it is the second way of formation of identity on the basis of more than one characteristic, culture, customs, region, religion, caste, which is considered as most common way of formation of ethnic identity. The one ethnic identity is formed in relation to the other ethnic identity. The relations between more than one ethnic identities can be both harmonious and conflictual. Whenever there is competition among the ethnic identities on the real or imaginary basis, it is expressed in the form of autonomy movements, demand for secession, or ethnic riots. Identity politics, or what we might address as the demand for recognition, is at its core essentially the politics of equal dignity and the politics of difference. It has emerged both in developing and developed world and has its roots in gender politics, sexual politics, ethnic politics, and religious interpretations or some combination thereof. Thank you for watching the presentation.